Welcome to our guests and to our viewers. You're now tuned into Education in the Community, and I am your host, Kinara Sankofa. And today we will be discussing a very powerful topic. Today we'll be discussing the mental, spiritual, and physical parasites affecting the Black community. And today I have three wonderful, powerful guests, and to my very far left, I'd like to start off with inviting my sister and friend, Yaya is here. Miss Yaya is a consultant, a healer, a naturalist, and dealing with over 20 years of experience in the herbal and nutritional life or arena. And also, she is a student of the world-renowned Lada, Africa. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. It's good to see you.
It's good to be seen.
And to her immediate right, we have my friend, brother. It's been a while since we've seen each other on the show, but I'd like to welcome Syfr Zero Saba, Universal Soul Warrior. This is his second time being on the show here. And he is also an entrepreneur. He has his own clothing label, which is called Ya Phat Wear.
Ya Phat Wear.
Ya Phat
Yes,
Wear.
sir.
Wonderful. And is also has his business and the home recycle business as well, correct?
Yes, sir.
Welcome to the show. Thank you for coming back.
Thank you, man.
And to my left, I have a very powerful, wonderful lady as well, Miss Akhi Nefu Lada. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yes.
How you doing today?
I'm
sister?
doing wonderful.
Thank you for being here. And Miss Lada, she's an advocate for life force and energy, getting into your energy. And then also, she's the co-founder of Spiritual or Spiral Collective. Would that be correct?
Spiral Root Collective, yes.
Welcome to the show. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
So we're going to get right into it, ladies and gentlemen. We were talking about, Syfr Zero and I, we talked about what is going on in the community. And so we decided to call this particular show the spiritual and mental, as well as the physical parasites dealing with the African world. And so I'd like to ask our guests, I've already looked it up, but I want to ask any one of you, what are we talking about when we speak about parasites? And how is that in effect affecting the community? Anyone can answer the question if you like.
Well, I'd like to, from a health perspective, a parasite is an organism that does not live on its own volition. It has to have a host in order to function. The human body has many parasites. Some are beneficial and some are not. And so there, on the physical plane, it takes many forms: microbes, actual worms, fungi. And on the spiritual plane, it takes on energies that feed upon the life force of people. So like a quote unquote spiritual vampire, that's parasitic. And then on the mental, it's thought patterns, programming, subliminal suggestions, misperceptions, misconceptions, all types of things that live in the mind, but are not necessarily feeding the mind, maybe feeding off and draining the mind.
So do you think that we are aware, when I say we, speaking of the Black people or Black community, do you think that we are aware of these parasites that are happening to us on a physical plane and then also on the psychological plane? Are we aware of these things that's going on?
I think not at this time, the way that we were perhaps maybe 60 years ago, when the grandmothers, mostly the natural healers of our community, would each season, they would give a dose of something to either castor oil or castoria or pine tar, who knows, any herbal disinfectant to rid the body of worms. And it was regular and it was done consistently. And that particular habit is no longer in the minds of people that I interact with. People don't think about it anymore.
So are we conditioned to not think of the past or our culture from a holistic perspective, going back to the motherland and dealing with some of the things? Sure.
I'm glad you asked that question the way you asked it, because I think now we begin to get into the other type of the world parasites, in a sense. the intent is to suck up all of the nutrients, the minerals, the fuel, the energy from the peoples of the planet to, for their own benefit.
You say for their own. When you say their own, could you elaborate when you say their own to our audience and to us here? Let's, as you know, when we come into the studio, okay, so we pull no punches here.
We don't hold any punches
We don't
back.
hold anything back because we're at, in my opinion, as a people in a state of emergency.
We are. The
Okay.
world is in a state of
Of course,
emergency,
of
but
course.
definitely us. Yes.
Definitely us.
Yeah.
So in order to heal this problem that we're having, we cannot afford to not be truthful in our own opinions because we're going to be speaking about opinions. We're going to be speaking about facts. So we cannot afford not to tell our story or tell the story as you may see it and be correct with it.
That's right.
So please speak freely. And when I mean freely, speak on it.
So it was really just a matter of working on downloading framing at that point in time. But I wanted to also be clear. So I want to touch on what you said, but I want to go into what you asked earlier before that, which was in terms of the loss of history or culture or the lack of memory, the amnesia to a degree, which is all intentional. In fact, a Virginia House of Representatives delegate from the 1800s, not sure of the name, I can't remember it right now, or the exact year, but it was in the 1800s, and the statement was, by now we have closed off every avenue through which light can enter their minds. Surely they will be as beasts in the fields. So in that sense, the parasitic nature is to cut off light, to take the energy. What other energy was being used? The energy of our physical bodies, but as well as our minds, what skills that we brought. A lot of people think they just snatched people off the continent, but no. There were a lot of skilled people. People were observed and analyzed. It didn't just happen. They looked at who they were bringing, and you.
How did we allow it? If we are the first people of the world, not the new world, but the planet, how did we allow it if we were the first psychologists, medicine man and woman? How did we allow the trick, the parasite, to enter into our spirits, into our bodies per se? How did it happen?
May I speak to that?
Let's get it. As one of the guys said, let's get ready to rumble. Let's bring it. So
Well, as we know, even with in the plant world, because if we can take it to where it can be neutral, in the plant world, there's a life cycle. There's the seed, and then there's the little sprout, and then there's the plant, and then there's blossoms, and if it's a tree, then it grows, and then it hits a peak, and then it starts to go back to the earth. If indeed there were a first people, then they too, the seed, the sprout, the form, and then we reached a peak. And we have reached several peaks.
Thank you, yes ma'am.
And we have had several downsides. I suspect from the fact that the planet itself is so toxic that this is the worst down spiral that has ever existed.
And probably one of the quickest too, because America as a nation is the amount of time is so small.
Yes.
Whereas if we go back to, for example, ancient Kemet, the last known historical moment that we know of, it lasted as a civilization for 3,000 years. With all of the invasions, with inner chaos, it still stood culturally and sacredly strong, which is even why invaders would come in and copy the culture. You go and you invade someone, you occupy and you dominate them, but you mimic their cultural and spiritual ways.
So
that's power.
Okay. So we in effect allowed this to transpire. You said that there's a cycle that happens, that you reach the pinnacle, And then that cycle is kind of like a tree. It never dies. The root still is there, or the flower, it will fall off and then it will recycle itself or reincarnate itself.
The genetic memory.
Okay. So we have a genetic memory. So are we on the upswing or are we on the downswing? Because if you look at what's going on in our community, or can we call it a community?
Common unity? I don't think so.
Why not?
Common unity, we don't have it. Not in large enough mass.
It also goes back to that communication. And Yaya mentioned those remedies. I was a recipient of some of those remedies on a consistent basis. I cannot say that I carry them on to my daughter, but I have restarted because I have gone back to the teachings, of my grandmother, who always had an almanac on the table, who did things a certain way, but the communication piece wasn't there. It wasn't communicate why my mother did these things or why my grandmother did these things. And so that piece, it wasn't, it was just like, okay, it was something that we did. I didn't see the value of it. And sometimes when you don't see the value of it, then you don't carry on the tradition. And something like that is very important because when you're infested with physical parasites, then you are more susceptible to the other metaphysical parasites.
So could we, I won't say blame ourselves, are we lacking or in some respects, if it's up to us to rid of these parasites, we have to have our own institutions. We have to have our own educational systems. We have
Our
to
own
have
castor oil.
Pardon me?
Our own castor oil.
I just say the
Our own garlic.
So how do we get back to that if we don't want to take the medicine? You would hear, for example, the Jewish community or folks will not ever let the Holocaust go unchecked or unheard. They always remind you.
Never again.
Whereas we as a people don't want to hear about the past. Now I say that we cannot stay in the past. We have to go back. That's exactly what Sankofa means, is to go back. But we also need to go forward. So how is it that we refuse to want to go back and deal with those tenants that are causing the problem with the parasites?
Well, that's symptomatic of being infected.
Right.
Your judgment is off. And I want to speak to the phrase you used as far as we allowed it. In nature, which is the grand scheme of everything, organisms are weeded out. That's the way it works. And so when you're in a downward spiral, if you're weak or tired or famine or flood, whatever, that leaves you more susceptible. It does not mean that you're allowing it. It's just you're susceptible. And let's face it, all life forms want to continue. So then the parasites, that's their upswing. Our downswing, their upswing. And then they're like, ooh, opportunity, get it. Okay, so they do this. It is for us to recognize the symptomology. Then we could do something about it. However, if we're going to deal with worms, parasites, they give off secretions. Their secretions, their byproduct, their waste material is in our bloodstream, and it's ammonia. Now, they use ammonia salts for when people are unconscious. They put the smelling salts under the nose, and it wakes you up, blasts your brain, really. So we're walking around physically in a state of blasted brain. It's just boom, wide open. And so things can come in and attach themselves to our thought processes. So it's not so much a matter, I suspect, it's not so much a matter of allowing or not wanting. It's more a matter of being in the infection and being one of those organisms by nature that says, ooh, something's off. Because everyone is not going to survive
So
this.
how do you
Right,
bring
thank
the
you.
balance if it's about being off and it's about recognition and not being in denial? How do we bring it back then? Because we are looking at, 5, 6 generations and deeper of the unknowing. How do we bring the balance back? How do you bring the healing back when we have so many different institutions and getting so many different layers of information that's not proper information for the soul or for the spirit? How do we bring it back?
I think by going straight to the root
How do you
and
get to
getting
the
back
root?
to loving ourselves. And because I think that there has not been a great enough value placed on us truly loving ourselves. Because when we do that, then we can take an investigative exploration into what that really means on
How do
all
we
levels.
understand what love is? How do we understand what love is? I mean, we have some folks out here thinking that, you know, to speak negatively is love. Okay, so how do we be able to differentiate what is love, true love, the root of it?
You have some folks thinking you can buy love.
Okay, all right. So how do we get back to it then? And I agree with you. I do agree with you. But how do we get back to that?
Yeah, I think we always look at things that, I mean, what she's saying is absolutely correct.
Yes.
We have to begin to do it, though, on an institutional level. We have to do, one, what we're doing here, what you're doing here, and thank you again, brother.
Appreciate
you know
you.
what I'm saying, for doing the show and having your brother on. But this is a start, or this is one aspect, media, because we're affected, as we know, by all different types of parasites in all of life's activities. And so so we have to stop having these silly debates about whether things are intentional or not. In one sense, it doesn't matter. Right. What are we going to do for our survival, period, is bottom line, because we really don't have to argue about some of the nuances that people argue about in terms of who's doing what and all of this. What are we as a people going to do? How are we going to build institutions? How much fire and heart and will and courage and perseverance are we going to have within amongst ourselves to stop doing some of the things that we are doing?
What if you don't know Syfr Zero? What if the masses of the people don't even know that they are infected or affected?
Well, that's what we're discussing. We already know that they don't. Right. So that's why those of us who carry light, those of us who do know, she hit on something like that. We have to become even stronger. We have to bear weight. You know, we have to carry the burden of producing. We know that we're at war on every level. The Panthers were really, the Black Panther Party, they were really an organization about what? Stopping the police brutality, the police murder that was happening against our people in the 50s and the 60s into the 70s. The breakfast program is modeled after them. That exists now across the nation. They fed over 22 million children or something over that time as they spread with the breakfast program. They were about, you know, creating safety zones, educating and feeding folk. But because of this fear from folk with also a parasitic nature as a collective on the planet, they deemed them to be, you know, communists, which is a whole nother discussion, because I'd rather have something that sounds like communal beingness, you know, that has the word community and common and communication in it versus some whatever the hell democracy is. A lot of DE means to subtract or take away from, and we don't know what democracy means yet. When you go to the Greek root, it's still it's not a clear wording. Even when you go to the root of the word, it's not clear. It doesn't, you know, they talk about Sanders, you know, in terms of the politics right now and how he's a social democrat. So people are awakening to the sleep that this world put on us in terms of things that are very
really believe
basic
that the
and
mass
common.
of our, when you say the people, are you speaking the world is awakening, the U.S., the folks here in the U.S.? Because when we're talking about this issue, this problem that is happening with Black people, and
it's worldwide.
and I'm going to say this, like Dr. Umar Johnson has stated, we have to be unapologetically unafraid to